To gap year or not to gap year? This is the age-old question for most students that are looking to start graduate school. Back in my day, i.e. like 2 years ago, gap years were something very new to me and I didn't know very much about it. So I ended up applying to grad school while in undergrad and going straight through and not taking a gap year. However, there's a lot of things that could be learned during the gap years and advantages that you can take advantage of during the gap year, and I'm going to cover them on the video today. Hello, my name is Ebony Monet, or Monet the Creator. I am so glad that you're tuning into this video, and I hope you're looking to learn more about gap years because that is the topic of today's video. So what is a gap year? A gap year is a 1 to 2 year break that is typically taken between undergraduate and grad school. A lot of students may use this time for a variety of reasons, which I'll cover in just a moment. But some students also decide to do gap years after high school in preparation for college. A lot of the times they might just not know what to do for college yet, and that is perfectly fine. But today I'm gonna really be talking about the gap years between undergraduate to graduate school. During this time, students that are taking gap years may engage in various activities, and they typically fall into the category of either personal fulfillment or professional development. So in the professional development world, a lot of people may try to take on internships or increase their work experience. So if you've seen my previous videos, I talked a lot about how important it is to have research experience in order to apply for a graduate program. So sometimes students find out too late that they want to go into grad school, or they just don't feel like their application is strong enough, so they end up doing some type of gap year so that they can also increase their research experience. A lot of the times this either looks like some type of research assistant or RA position, or this may be a post-baccalaureate program. These post-baccalaureate programs are very popular. A lot of different institutions have them, and they're normally some type of structured program to prepare someone to apply for grad school, on top of them having the opportunity to practice in the laboratory, be a part of a lab, and get a lot of skills that way. Some students may even take additional courses during the gap years. Maybe you're deciding to switch fields, and in order to switch fields, it's in your best interest to get some more classes under your belt so you can get admission into the correct programs. This may be to further their own personal education, or even to really beef up their application if they're interested in switching career fields from what they were originally doing. Another option very related to this is actually doing a master's abroad, or just doing a master's degree program in general. In the United States, a master's degree is not necessary to apply for most PhD programs. If you're interested in doing a PhD abroad, however, the master's is typically something that you have to do. However, a lot of people may choose to do master's abroad programs because it just gives them that international experience on top of getting a degree. And a lot of those programs are also paid for, so it's kind of a win-win situation. So on the branch of personal fulfillment, people may also use gap years to travel, volunteer, or even personal development, and trying to understand like, what is it that I would like to get from my graduate school experience. A few benefits of taking a gap year. So this is especially true for those who are looking for research assistant or RA positions, or are looking to join a post-baccalaureate program. Research methods and project management. These are some of the hardest things to figure out once you're already in school. However, like experimental design, being able to analyze and find appropriate literature, and learning to organize projects and keep them all running along the pipeline, as well as time management. These are all skills that you can definitely learn during your gap year and not have so much on the line, such as like your PhD project. Technical skills. So labs have all sorts of technical skills. Let's say that you had research experience and you only worked with C. elegans, or it's like a worm model system. However, you're really interested in moving into mouse work. Well, it would be very helpful for you to have some skills under your belt that are related to mouse handling and mouse genetics. That is very different from that you would have gotten from that prior research experience. This is also important for just using general lab equipment or learning microscopy, lots of different things. You get so much practice with critical thinking and problem solving. This is critical for training PhDs. You have to know how to problem solve and how to pivot. Data management. Now this one is really tough just because, like, as researchers, and especially in today's world where we're able to collect so many different types of data, data can just become so much and so overwhelming, and it's in your best interest to have a practice of organizing your data, collecting your data, how you have your folders. Do you use dates? Do you use certain acronyms? Communication skills is a huge one. So a lot of RAs or postbacks may have the opportunity to go to some type of conference and present their research that they've been working on, or they may be involved in writing a paper that is related to the work that they were doing, or even writing a grant. All of those skills are skills that are applicable to the PhD and also beef up your application when applying to PhD programs. Collaboration is huge in the research field. So learning how to collaborate with various types of people, or just having more than just one lab that you have collaborated with, can really be helpful in learning to work with new people, as well as being very beneficial if you don't have much of a research background. Innovation and creativity. So this is another skill that can't necessarily be learned, but is a big part of the PhD. You have to know how to just think outside the box and think innovatively. What is some new way that you may be able to answer a question, or maybe a new way that you could approach a historical question that may have been established? Your own lab data somewhat disagrees with that and shows that this process may be slightly different. You have to really know how to think critically and think outside the box for things like that. And that's definitely some skills that you get during this gap year. And lastly, adaptability and being resilient. So this is huge because you just have to know how to pivot or like really adjust to a research world. People have different work habits, people have different expectations depending on what kind of lab you're in, or maybe what level you may be at in the lab, whether that be postdoc, an actual doctoral student, or a postbac or an RA. But a lot of this adaptability has to do with learning how to deal with failure. It's really easy when you're in a gap year to see the failure as, well, that experiment didn't work, and not so much to take it personally. It's really easy during a gap year to really dissociate from failures in science, which is a huge thing as we've talked about. And it also helps you not see that progress or the lack thereof as something that is impeding the progress towards your degree. Since you're just in a postbac program, you're not someone that is trying to make progress on a degree such that the data that you receive, positive or negative, is really impactful towards your time at the university, for example. What are the downsides of doing a gap year or a postbac or an RA position? Honestly, there are not very many. A lot of people have fear of losing motivation during gap years because they're just stepping away from academia, from classwork, from being a part of a degree program. However, a lot of people that I've spoken to that have taken gap years and have talked about like having that fear have mentioned that during the gap year they actually had so much more excitement and drive in returning to the laboratory and getting to work on their PhD. So a lot of people have some sort of readjustment period because, you know, once you're in a gap year, you're not really in a class schedule, you're just working 9 to 5, and whenever you are back in classes and also having to rotate and do all these things that are like academically required, it is very challenging for some people to readjust into that space. And I think that's where a lot of the fear does stem from, is trying to readjust from this 9 to 5 work-life balance that you've established and getting back into like the student mindset. A lot of people have also mentioned just like not remembering things from undergrad. So this is just like a very random point, but just like whenever you are in a graduate school program, they're normally expecting like, okay, you took genetics, so you have to take this genetics class and it'll be advanced genetics. However, if you haven't taken genetics since sophomore year and you took 2 years off, that means you haven't taken genetics in at least 4 years, and it might be difficult to recall that far back to some of the different topic areas that might be related to the classes you have to take. So what about not taking a gap year? For example, that is me. I think that there's a lot that you don't see from people who end up going straight through from undergraduate to grad school. Primarily, we end up applying for grad school while in undergrad. So this is just a very stressful experience because on top of, and like if you're in the research sciences, you're likely doing this, on top of having like the senior honors thesis that you're working on, or possibly a capstone, finishing up your coursework, possibly like higher level leadership positions at your institution if you're involved in extracurricular activities, like you're also applying to grad school, which has so many components to it. It has the research statement component, the personal statement component, and all these moving parts that you have to work on concurrently as you're trying to graduate from undergrad. It is so competitive to be an undergraduate and trying to apply to grad school versus like having taken gap years and applying to grad school. And an example I have is my own cohort again. I believe there's no more than 5 people that are directly from undergrad, which is like a very, very low amount of people. That means that the rest of the 30+ people in my cohort have taken gap years. And there's a lot that kind of comes with that. For one, like there's just the application pool in itself was very competitive, and I didn't really realize that until I was having my interviews and like everyone was telling me about, oh, I'm taking my gap years, or oh, I've worked in this lab for the last 2 years, and I'm like, oh, like I am still in undergrad, I don't have my bachelor's yet. And my application pool was extremely special because I was a part of the application pool that kind of like is when COVID started getting better. So like the 21 to 2022 school year, and a lot of the people in my cohort had taken gap years because of COVID. Like they graduated in 2020 and they didn't have a graduation. They may have felt like they didn't have enough time and opportunity to prepare for grad school, and so they ended up taking gap years. So it just, again, made the application pool extremely competitive for my year at least. And so let's talk about some of the benefits of not taking a gap year. So in theory, you finish school sooner. I say it in quotations because truly, if you end up having a hard time or suffer a lot of burnout, which I'm going to discuss in just a minute, you end up slowing down. So is there really a time saver there? It really depends on how much time you're in school at the end of the day. A lot of people do see this as an advantage though, because they're able to get into their career, their desired career, faster than if they were to have taken those gap years. A lot of people who don't take gap years also still have that fire and they don't lose that academic drive. There's a lot of focus for that reason, and not so much readjustment requiring or like adjusting back into that student schedule whenever you're still like in a student mindset. Job market conditions. So this is a huge one that I didn't even really think about, but just because there are options for gap years, like those positions are still very hard to get. There's only so many positions available out there, and there's a possibility that even if you decide to take a gap year, you might not be able to find an RA position or get into a post-baccalaureate program. And another reason that a lot of people will end up not taking a gap year is to stay on track with their peers or their cohort mates. I don't necessarily agree with this justification, because at the end of the day, like our educations are all individual, they're all specified to us. Wanting to be with your friends isn't really the best reason to decide to just go straight through, especially whenever you may feel that you would really benefit from a break. Let's talk about some of the downsides of not taking a gap year. So going straight through without some sort of break or some sort of opportunity to separate yourself from like being a student can just result in burnout. And this burnout can show up in a variety of different ways. I know for me, it has been very hard for me to separate my identity as a student to just like what my identity is and what I would desire and do if I was not currently in school. And for that reason, it's been very hard for me to figure out like what do I really want and how can I use this degree to really get me there. It's also very stressful trying to move to a new city, and especially in such a short time. And I moved from Miami to Boston, so that's like a huge move, and it was very challenging, especially because of Boston's housing market. With the fact that like my school is only just now giving us a living wage, it was also very financially challenging. You could also use the gap year to really springboard yourself financially. So trying to save up money for rent or for moving expenses or for any other spontaneous expense that you may run into while in grad school. I know I definitely would have benefited from having that time off and being able to save additional money. I am also really struggling with academic fatigue. So first, just still being in classes and still being in this routine, like it's really tiring. And I've been in school like for as long as I can remember. So that could just really weigh down on you and also result in burnout. And secondly, a lot of high functioning academics will have the tendency to compare themselves to other people. And so I found myself in that bucket. Whenever you're in class sitting next to people who took 2 years off of school and clearly they just have more time in the research field than you do, like it can definitely feel discouraging and as if you don't necessarily belong. And that kind of just ties into like having less experience. Like I ended up joining a lab that has a lot of mouse work, and the first time that I touched the mouse was like my first rotation in grad school. And so trying to learn a lot of those technical skills has been a huge learning curve, and I know I would have benefited from having that time, that additional time from a gap year to learn how to do more mouse work. And also, and this is an interesting one, but you may have more limited networking opportunities, and that really just comes down to the commitment that you already have, like being in school and being like a researcher. Like it's very hard for you to, all right, I need to find some time to network and find different mentors for different purposes. It was also hard for me to determine what style of mentorship would have been really great for me without having a lot of people within my network to talk to about those things as well. So just very briefly, I feel like there is like misinformation or misconceptions about the gap year, and the major one is like, you do not have to feel obligated to keep going through school if you feel you need a break. If you need to hear that, I hope that that message is being received. I remember a lot of people mentioning the gap year, but not really explaining much about what it entailed. And so I was very fearful myself of taking the gap year and not really knowing what would happen or if I would still feel driven myself to go on and do the PhD. So, you know, I think it's really important to close off this video with a major lesson that I have learned regardless of me not taking a gap year, and that is that I am more than worthy and deserving to be here, to be at Harvard, to be in this PhD program, and that my lack of experience does not really mean anything. Truly, still getting into the program means that I am still a stellar student. So I'm really trying to look at it that way versus, oh, like I don't have these other years under my belt that other people may have. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, share all your thoughts about gap years. I would love to hear more about your gap year experience, or if you're planning on doing a gap year, considering it, please share that in the comment section. I would love to hear more about that. And lastly, if me interviewing someone that has taken gap years might be helpful or informative to you, please let me know. I would love to do an interview of that nature. Please let me know. I would love to find someone to do that kind of interview and share that with you guys. So once again, this has been Monet the Creator. I am so glad that you were able to tune in for today's video, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.